Good evening. I believe I just started the episode by gliding on some fruit juice. I can heartily recommend in these temperatures, everyone should stay hydrated. But I must caveat that with, if you host a podcast and you're introducing that podcast, don't take a gulp as you're starting the episode, because it makes for an incredibly unpleasant audio experience. That's just my honest advice to you. Hello everyone, it's episode 224 of Real Matter. We haven't had guests on for a while because of a variety of factors the last 2 months. I know there's always excuses, but this is a one-man band. It's just me, just little old me. But you'll be glad to know that we do have some guests will be joining us soon, which I'm very glad to say. This episode, it is episode 224, as I said about 17 seconds ago. What's left of HS2? I flicked through the latest National Audit Office report. Yes, we're going to be going through the latest NAO report that came out last week, I think. So it's fairly topical. Because I think it quite neatly goes into a lot of the mess that has been caused by... let's start the episode and then do some big face chat, right, for context. So... the project is continuing. HS2 is, well, bits of it are happening. The project has been largely cancelled. The important bits have been canned off. The kind of shuttle stub from just outside London up to Birmingham is continuing. We will need that bit anyway, so it is not that bit loses its value, not at all. That bit is necessary for the whole picture, but there are problems, and we're going to talk about those problems. So, I am going to get cracking. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. Well, that didn't work, did it? Let's try that again, shall we? But this time, functional. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. Oh, no, it isn't working. Wait a minute. Let's try again. As the Intercity 225 fades away. Oh. Yeah, let's go big face for a little bit. With what's a bit of a shonky start. It's been a bit of a chaotic 2 months, particularly last week. Yeah, this is a ropey beginning to the episode. Intro cancelled to fill a 22 billion quid black hole. Yeah, there's so much news to catch up with, which we're not going to do this episode. We're going to do that next episode. I wanted to start by... there will be some news, but one bit of news. But first, I want to give a bit of HS2 context. Or am I going to do the news first? Nah, maybe I'll do the news first. Just a bit of just Ireland. Look, it's Ireland. It's the island of Ireland. And as of yesterday, the Oil Island Rail Review has made its recommendations about what the rail network needs to look like. And it's less ambitious than that we might have hoped, but there's quite a bit in there, including a fairly substantial amount of two tracking or indeed four tracking, and yeah, there's quite a few new stations proposed. There's some ambitious stuff there, and I suppose the key point that this boils down to is, for starters, like Northern Ireland, the UK bit of this is absolutely not going to keep its end of the bargain up because of who's in government right now. So it's unlikely that bit will be funded, even though it's clear that it's needed, and this does have buy-in across both sides of the border, north and south. But the key thing is this is ambition. This is what a plan needs to look like. It needs to have lines on a map. This is what a plan at its most fundamental should look like, is the ambition for what the network should look like. And whether that gets delivered in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that can be variable. But showing what the final network should look like to aspire to the nation's needs for mobility, and indeed in this case to aspire to the island's need for mobility, should be step one, or a very early step in the process, as we've discussed before a lot. I welcome Ireland's rail ambitions and I encourage them to go further. Ewan, yes, except that Keir would never say that. Wonder why the bit of HS2 left was in Ireland. Well, yeah, quite. So, anyway, that is a brief bit of news. We'll do some more news next week, I think. We'll do some more news next week. Next week's going to be a bit of an open... Oh, yeah, I've not even decided what next week's going to be. We'll get to that bit momentarily. Anyway, so, right, big face. The context for this, we need to talk about the context for what's going on here, right? So, the issue we have here is that HS2, context, step back. We know HS2 has been made an absolute mess of. We've revisited this over and over again. And much of the issues don't just come from Sunak's cancellation of all of the rest of it. They date back even before the integrated rail plan in 2021. Before that, even because you had the stupid meddling with Euston to attempt to make it cheaper. If you remember, we went through the previous National Audit Office report, and it laid out in absolutely clear detail that the meddling with Euston has increased the price and actually has ended up being more expensive than if they just delivered the station as it was supposed to be. So that's kind of HS2 as a meddling with the project situation. Another key point, we'll see, it'll be interesting to see what the NAO come up with. HS2 has not been curtailed because of its cost. That is a convenient thing for people to tell themselves. It's nonsense. So any commentator who suggests that its cost is the reason HS2 has been cancelled is a moron. They just have no idea what they're talking about. Their opinion should be discarded, and it's likely that their opinion should be mistrusted on a lot of other things as well. Like, it is just not why HS2 has been cancelled. Hence why Sunak cancelled it at the Conservative Party conference. It was a political decision made to attempt to win over voters, and it did not succeed. Yes, I am indeed naming next week's episode while we converse. So, there we go, that'll do for now. Right, anyway, I digress. Minimise that, continue with what I'm doing. So, the fiddling with the project is one thing. The other context that's important is the fact that HS2 is still not factoring in any discussions about what the future of transport should look like from a Labour perspective, along with Labour picking up, and again, we'll go into the news for this next week, but along with Labour picking up the baton from Cameron and Osborne to just carry forward austerity politics again, just to continue with that. So the context of that is pertinent for us to look through this NAO report. I'm very glad this report is done. The NAO and I do not see eye to eye necessarily on or rather the NAO, possibly from a technocratic perspective, feels like it's not necessary for it to think about whether HS2 is a good idea or not. But actually they do in this report start realising, it's almost like the NAO has come to the realisation of, actually HS2 is a necessary thing, and if we don't do it, there are going to be serious problems. So, without further ado, we're already 10 minutes in, let's crack on. So, let me minimise my face into a miniaturised shape. Any questions? Oh, there are a few questions coming through. Tell you what, let's re-maximise my face, just pick up some of these questions. Always slightly worrying to see an intercity map with the phrase single track on it. Yes, agreed. Raphael Nicholas, you say the bit being built is already very important. Will you show the impact London-Birmingham shuttle will already have on the existing network, maybe even from the north? None of any value. So, as it stands right now, HS2 is almost useless. It's almost completely useless. There's some minor benefits between London and Birmingham, but those benefits are greatly ameliorated by the lack of the hall. Hello, Daniel Field. Oh, Daniel. Hello, Gareth. First time watching live, long time listener on YouTube. I missed the social media trends last week. I'm from Leeds. You make great points. Daniel Field. Hello, Daniel. Pleasure to have you on. Thanks, Gareth, for the double tag. We'll be chatting about the Ireland map, I am very, very sure, very shortly, because we have an episode coming up about Ireland again. Yes, Raphael, meddling in the project. Haven't they learned anything from? No one's learned anything about from the past. So, Anne Person absolutely rightly says, just build the fucking railway, Keith. Yeah, absolutely. Right. The only place with any noticeable benefits from what's left is Milton Keynes. Well, yeah, quite. So let me get rid of my face and let's crack on. In the words of the late, great James Acaster. He's still alive, by the way. Right, so HS2 update following cancellation of Phase 2. This is the NAO report. We're going to dive into it without further ado. In fact, we're just going to get cracking. We're going to do this thing immediately. My mouse is up. It's showing. It's visible. Let's go. But as ever, a reminder to those in the chat, if you want me to spot a line, spot a question or a query or a comment, at my name, and it should appear in red, and then that way I can spot it nice and easily. I generally drag through, and it differentiates between you lot chatting amongst yourselves and you lot shouting things at me. So this is... We're going to get cracking. First of all, this is a classic Rail Natter page turn, which you always enjoy these. And it's always a pleasure to have you along for them. So what have we got? We've got about, 35 pages maybe here of stuff. So there's various things here. So there's key facts. October 2023, the government announced decisions on the High-Speed 2 programme to complete Phase 1, cancel the rest of the railway, and revise how it will fund and deliver the London Terminus station at Euston. By the way, a word on the delivery model for Euston Station. If people say we're going to deliver, particularly in the UK, it's perhaps less true in other places, but particularly in the UK, if someone says we're going to deliver a piece of major transport infrastructure with private funding, what they mean is we're not going to deliver that piece of infrastructure. It's particularly for a station like Euston, there is no viable model that involves private capital that doesn't compromise that station potentially to a permanent end. So yeah, and of course that's exactly the logic that's being continued by the current government as well. Between 2029 and 2033 is when the DfT expects Phase 1 of the programme to start running between Old Oak Common and Birmingham. What an embarrassing situation. The project was supposed to have concluded in the middle of the 2020s to Euston, and it's been delayed horrendously. Funnily enough, by a lot of that being down to government meddling. Total spend on the programme so far is £30 billion, of which 27.8 billion is on Phase 1. Now, these numbers are in 2019 prices, FYI, so there's been some inflation since then, but using 2019 prices allows consistency between them. So you can do your own calculations to change those numbers, but these are all in 2019 prices. The current funding envelope for Phase 1 is 44.6 billion, so about another 15 billion quid. And the estimated total cost to complete will be another 9 billion on top of that expected prior to the October 2023 decisions. HS2 Limited's estimate is 49 to 57 billion, so even slightly higher. Programme spend on land and property along the Phase 2 route at the end of March 2024 that is no longer needed for HS2. I mean, it bloody is needed, by the way, is about 600 million quid. So they've spent the best part of £1 billion on land that's no longer needed. 179 parcels of agricultural land across 63 farms that HS2 Limited will potentially dispose of in its first phase of disposals. Do not do that. Do not do that. 100 million is the estimate of the cost of remediation to close down sites where early work had already begun on Phase 2. It's just excruciatingly embarrassing, isn't it, that we're in this position. So we're going to forget the summary, chuck that out the window, don't care. Let's crack on with reading the actually just check just in case. Yeah, okay, so we'll go into the details. So there's the background here. So we don't need to dwell on this because we've all been through this ad infinitum, haven't we, together? So Raphael Nicolaus is okay, so the current HS2 bit is only the foundation to a house, with the rest of the project, the cancelled parts, actually being the house. It's kind of a reasonable analogy, I would say. Bacchus, sorry, I won't scare you like that. Acaster's still with us. So, still one of the funniest bits of Taskmaster is when James Acaster gets a talking to by Greg Davis. That still tickles me greatly. Anyway, we digress. Sorry, that's how my brain works. It's a fireworks display. So, the rest of the new rail being delivered through Phase 2 will be cancelled. I enjoy them writing that reasonably, by its brevity, that's fairly condescending, which I enjoy. Along with a connection to the West Coast Main Line by completing Phase 1 of the programme, fine. Status of the 4 phases. Eastern leg here. Status at the end of September 2023. This is the in 2021, DfT revised its plans for the Phase 2B Eastern Leg as part of its integrated rail plan. Set out the HS2 railway would instead run from West Midlands to East Midlands Parkway as HS2 East, with a study proposed to consider how HS2 trains with Lawrence Leeds. That's called being cancelled. I love the optimism of them saying that at the end of September 2023 that was at the planning stage. No. Anyway, what the note here is, yes, on the 4th of October, the government cancelled Phase 2A, Phase 2B Western Leg, and Phase 2B Eastern Leg, HS2 East. All that disappeared. A reminder again that this is Sir John Armitt's fault, among many others. This is the National Infrastructure Commission's fault for opening the door and through a fundamental and deep miscalculation within their sums, opening the door on the potential to crop HS2 in some way, that being a good idea, and potentially as some way to appease Treasury was to say, oh, we'll give you this little bit, you can have this little bit that we're going to cancel, and that way we'll get to deliver the rest. No, what you did was prove that it was possible to cancel it, and then the rest just tumbled, as has Euston. So this is a consistent thing, and it's a theme that's coming out from a discussion that's going on Twitter right now over the absolute muppets at Britain Remade, the shifty, horrible think tank that I have absolutely no time for, and who are obsessed on project costs, thinking that's the reason that stuff doesn't happen in Britain, rather than it being a deep and problematic symptom of a deeper, of a more insidious rot. Fixation with an attitude of if we just save the costs now, or lots of people are saying, coming up with this kind of this north-south argument of, oh, if they hadn't spent the money there, we'd maybe get stuff. It's like, no, the issue is not about money. It's the fact that nothing is happening. The Treasury won't fund it if it's expensive. They won't fund it if it's cheap. They're just not interested in funding it. That's the problem. There we go. So 2020 and 2024. We know all this. We know all this stuff. We've gone through all this. So let's. Government has set out these changes. Okay, so plan changes. Changes resulting changes in costs and schedule. Remember that the benefit cost ratio is just absolute dog's dinner. It had bared no relationship to what the need for the project is. So the idea of cancelling a project based on a single number that represents nothing is an uncomfortable joke. And they're still using COVID travel patterns as a justification as well. So the fact that this is the delays into this program, it's being delayed because government is completely apathetic on, kind of absolutely uninterested in actually delivering it. If there was an intent to actually deliver the project, it would be delivered at pace rather than hunting for reductions in costs, and constant government meddling as well. So anyway, right, fine. So that's the kind of the warm up in the background. Part 2 is responding to changes in the HS2 program. This part examines how the DfT and iSpeed 2 Limited responded to the changes and managed risk to the HS2 program following the changes to its scope. It examines their progress on 3 points: close down of phase 2, disposing land and money, and then the changes on phase 1. God, this is going to start getting depressing. I might skip sections on land sale because we can read. You can pick up the NAO report and read it, but I don't think there's much I have to say on it other than don't do it. So, assessing the impact of scope changes on phase 1. Government announcement in October 2023 set out its broad intention for the HS2 program scope. Given the size and complexity of the program, there's a lot of detail work for DfT and HS2 Limited to complete to understand the consequences of the decision. It's good that they were warned. They were not warned. Once the scope changes had been announced, DfT needed to work through and understand in more technical detail the consequences for the programme. The decision created uncertainties about what infrastructure and rolling stock will be required on phase 1 to support the number of expected HS2 services, such as how many train services would run a configuration rolling stock, how trains would connect to the West Coast Main Line, big question mark on that, how many platforms would be required at Brum, and what track layout would be required to access stations. Yeah, quite. These decisions impact on HS2, but also Network Rail, and also the weird franchising partnership nonsense thing that is run by Avanti, West Coast Partnership. They had not been involved with the scope changes announced in October 2023. Again, the short, snappy sentences are usually the ones that are like, this was an insane thing to have happened. With phase 1 construction already underway, DfT needs to provide clarity on what work would need to be stopped or changed to avoid unnecessary costs. DfT and HS2 quickly identified key decisions that need to be made and commissioned and obtained information from HS2, Network Rail and West Coast Partnership in a 6-week period between November and mid-December 2023. I bet that was cheap. Panic stations overtime of all the consultancies that will be involved in assessing and understanding that, and the contractors. Just enormous money will have been spent there. Probably like you've been looking at like a 50 million quid being spent in that 6-week period. Like it will have been, the bill would have been absolutely enormous. This enabled DfT to submit options and recommendations to ministers who agreed with the recommended actions in Jan 24. DFT are retaining the current design and fleet size of the rolling stock, having concluded the changes it would need to improve seating capacity following the October 2023 decisions could lead to significant additional costs and operational issues, compromising the whole bloody thing. In both directions. Like, no decision would have been a good one. If they changed the train contract, that would have trapped us infinitely with the wrong trains. If they leave it as it is, then it means that without building the infrastructure, we're trapped with a worse capacity condition on the West Coast Main Line. Decisions DFT has made so far have been have been to continue with building infrastructure and acquiring rolling stock to existing designs due to the costs involved with stopping work or changing designs at this stage. In some cases, the decision to continue work to existing designs means the infrastructure would be complete. There's not required for Phase 1. For example, DFT decided that Birmingham Curzon Street Station would be completed with all its 7 platforms, but the number of train services only requires 3 platforms. What an embarrassment. As a result, HS2 would not look to fit out the remaining 4 platforms, such as with the rail systems needed to make them operational to avoid unnecessary costs. Oh, God, it's excruciating, isn't it? Absolutely excruciating. DFT still has some decisions to make to finalise the scope of Phase 1, includes whether to cancel a short section is not required for Phase 1, but may enable future connection with the Eastern Rail Network. Yeah, that's at Delta Junction, a bit of the picture we showed earlier, actually. DFT and HS2 are undertaking further studies to help inform these decisions. They are now also conducting work to confirm what the revised scope of rail systems would now need to be to support the revised Phase 1. So that's potentially pulling back from slab track, which I cannot express enough how much of a compromised railway we'll have if they go back to ballast, because the whole alignment design has been designed to enable... The advantage of slab track is that you can mix the geometry much more easily, so you create a more complex geometry because slab track can enable it, whereas maintaining that with ballasted track is very, very difficult. If the railway will be compromised, and the maintenance costs therefore will be much, much greater if you jump back to ballasted track for Phase 1, and I fear that's the direction they're going. It'd be an abhorrent, very poor decision. So the approach to close down of Phase 2, this is going to be even more painful now. Phase 2 is at early stage, yes, we know that. So work underway was there's enabling work, early investigative works on land bought along Phase 2B, 100 boreholes made. So that's not so much on the western leg, but Phase 2A was pretty well advanced at this point. Although again, like, we wonder, it's like, well, the project, the delivery to Manchester had been delayed. It's DFT paused work for 2 years. Like, of course the project is delayed if you pause it for 2 years. Like, this is what I find baffling, is there's a bit of a disconnect. Like, why is the NAO not being explicit that the reason the programme has been delayed is because of changing the Euston design? Literally telling the construction project to stop for 2 years. These are all things that obviously delay and delay and delay. October 23, DFT instructed HS2 to stop work on Phase 2 as soon as practicable and avoid unnecessary costs, but in a safe and efficient way. In most cases, this would involve reinstating land to its former use or making land safe ahead of disposal to meet legal, health and safety and environmental regulations. Yep, fine. Some sites may be needed as part of the Northern Paris Rail Programme, may therefore not require remediation. DFT also instructed HS2 to maintain the condition of 46 sites where early environmental works to improve biodiversity have been completed pending the development of long-term management plans. Yeah, so some of the pre-works they've done of creating nice environmental space that would then have to be passed to a trust or whatever. HS2 set up a project for the close down remediation works, including Phase 2B boreholes. DFT expects HS2 will complete the remediation works by summer 2027, and estimates this will cost about 100 million quid, which is not a huge amount, to be honest. That's a lot of money, but relative to the project. As well as managing close down, HS2 needs to account for financial impact of 2023 decisions, accounting losses on spend that need to be written off, as well as accounting losses from changes at Euston. This will be in the annual report, which was published yesterday, and I haven't had time to pick through. I just haven't had the time to do that, or the mental capacity. But you can go in and dig that up if you wish to. Let's see. So, and the programme to dispose of land and property, which, good grief, do I want to even look at this? As at the end of March 2024, HS2 had spent nearly 4 billion quid on buying land and property along the whole route, of which 600 million relates to Phase 2. Fine. So I'm not going to dwell on that. If people want to pick into that, they are welcome to, but I think I'll find it too depressing. The reality is it's obviously stupid to sell that land, and they should not do that. Part 3 is Euston, and I think there's a lot of interest in what's happening at Euston. let's see. In fact, this, you know what? So this part 3. Let's just answer a few questions while we can. So, Jack Stonehouse, sorry for the late hello, but good evening. Hi, Jack. Bacchus is quoting Acaster at me, which is good. Hello, Katie. Hello, David. It's not that depressing when you remember that nothing has been sold. Yeah, nothing has been sold yet, but don't forget that the current government we have will be taking the worst trajectory on everything possible because they haven't really changed much. The colour of their tie has changed, and I have yet to see any evidence that much else will. It's all very well having a good transport secretary, but she has no power. As we've seen, Rachel Reeves has the power and just turned the austerity dial back up to 11 again. The land disposal feels, Raphael is saying, the land disposal feels like we're happy to dispose of these lands as quickly as possible because we can't do anything with that, and we figure that we don't need this railway, which is why we cancel it. It's a bit of a circular logic, yeah. David's asking, does this potentially mean DfT looking at connecting that up to the line towards Burton to run trains towards Nottingham, Derby, Sheffield? One way to use that extra platform capacity. There are some considerations, but at the moment that no one's looking at any additional connections, or it's just how do we step away from this project without without building anything more than we absolutely have to. Minimum. Nucker is saying, would you take ballast over no 2A? I think there's I don't accept the premise of the question. You need both. It has to be slab track, and we need not just 2A, but the whole lot up to Leeds and up to Manchester. The idea that it's not realistic to ask for that anymore. It's like the need for the project has only got more acute since it was first announced, like chronically so. Project was delayed due to it being delayed. Monty TH says, yeah, exactly. Jamie Potts, with the amount of dithering, delay, and meddling, it makes me wonder if anyone ever in government wanted to build HS2. No, I suspect very few people had any interest in it. It just was a large, frightening pig of a project that no one really understood. Nathan L., should we be encouraged that Rachel Reeves didn't announce Euston would be put on hold after it was teased in the media? I suspect it would have been too embarrassing given the announcement of the NAO, but I have full expectation that she's just saying, I'm not spending a penny on Euston, it's all private money, which means it'll not happen. Slow class for HM Treasury, absolutely, Monty. We may have changed the tie, but we shit our pants. Exactly, rigor mortis. Yeah, quite. Nooker, in future, is the way to avoid this mess to put infrastructure building behind an arm's length body so that decisions are made by experts who understand the project? No, because that's what HS2 was supposed to be, and look how that's worked out. Like, ultimately, the decision making is always going to be held at government level. Yes, there needs to be more autonomy in decision making and the way that budgets are managed, and more devolution of that power as well. But actually, no, what you do is you build HS2 has to be set into a broader plan. It has to be part of a bigger plan so that so that people can understand why it's indispensable, why the need for that project is indispensable, why it's impossible to deliver what is needed in terms of modal shift. So if we delivered the modal shift target first and said HS2 is a critical part in delivering this, then it'd be very difficult to say that you can deliver the mode shift target without HS2, and therefore cancelling it would be very politically challenging, if not impossible. But you need the mode shift target. That's the key thing. If you'd had the mode shift target, that would have allowed you to then say, well, HS2 delivers that in combination with these urban projects. That's the key problem. So taking it away from government wouldn't solve the problem, because that just functionally would never work. Victoria Almori is, are you not working full time or at all because of HS2? Will I ever be able to become a rail engineer in my lifetime? No. More on that in a couple of weeks, I bloody hope. But no, HS2's cancellation hasn't. Well, I was going to say hasn't impacted on what I'm working on, because I've been largely preoccupied on a Transpennine route upgrade. But it has had a severe impact on consultancies across the country, because a lot of consultancies had put all their eggs in the HS2 basket, and the HS2 basket has been set fire to and torched into ash and then buried. So it is a challenge. Victoria, you will be able to become a rail engineer in your lifetime, because this is there are no non-radical futures. Either we do this stuff slightly in advance of the chaos, or we do it in a panic later. But we will need railways in a big way, because we will never be able to generate enough electricity or smash up enough other countries to get the lithium to convert all of our cars and more critically trucks into electric vehicles. So yeah, we will need railways. East Coast timetable issues. By the way, East Coast timetable cancelled again. I wrote a piece on this, well worth going and having a read of that on Rail, and Rail Review as well for those who subscribe, talking about the East Coast Mainline timetable. I think definitely need to talk about that. Maybe that's a little bit we can talk about next week as well. Absolutely should be making the Leeds case for HS2 more obvious, absolutely. And I say it in my piece, without HS2, the East Coast Mainline will never be fixed, not even with doing stuff at Welling, etc., etc. We will give you slab track, but the slabs will be wood. Thank you, Painting 4. That there are reports that the last government are preparing to put $1 billion for tunnelling to Euston as one to watch. Yeah, I suspect we're about to be disappointed. CNER, I think the problem with HS2 is that Labour are terrified of the papers painting them as bad with the books, so they simply won't build HS2 to avoid the headlines. That's kind of true of everything. Yeah, as Currency Gareth has just said, exactly, yeah. Michael C. Is it worth the government setting a budget of a set amount to give to GBR to spend on infrastructure enhancement, including HS2 electrification, etc.? Well, yes. In a way, that's what control periods were supposed to be. But if you remember, government then pulled the enhancement budget out of the control period budget. So Network Rail lost that ability to invest that on that loop. And also HS2 was not within that number, of course. But yeah, BR2 should absolutely have a set figure for national projects and for national infrastructure maintenance and renewals. There should also be a substantial uplift and full power, devolved autonomous power of budget distribution to the combined authorities as well. Daniel Smith saying, so had a significant impact on my work. Most of my planned work for the next couple of years was crew on Network Works. So yeah, there's a lot of people you'll find in the rail industry who've had their futures substantially impacted. Now, how many apprentices are we talking about? Thousands of apprentices who've now not got anything to do for the future. Fantastic work. Absolutely fantastic. I cannot express my contempt for Sunak enough, but also for all those before who opened the door. So whether that's Shapps, whether it's Harper, but also Armit. Armit absolutely has the blood of the project on his hands, along with a lot of other people's blood on his hands. But there's a good play that you can watch to understand that. Anne Person, boy, I sure hope they found that clown who managed to get the second Brexit referendum in the 2019 manifesto. Yeah, I wonder who that was. Who was that guy? Who is that guy? Who is that guy? I welcome the first referendum, but I would encourage it to go. Anyway. Michael C's dad indirectly lost his job through the HS2 decision. Yeah, painful. Yeah. Anyway. So, let's get on with it, shall we? Painful. Do chuck in your questions. For everyone listening to this after the fact, hopefully the questions are interesting, but the podcast is premised on my guests being everyone watching. Hence the questions. So, Euston, this is where things get saucy. This part sets out the changes the government announced to the Euston programme, the DfT's progress to date in responding to those changes, and the risks it will need to manage in resetting the work at Euston. So, we know that Euston was to be designed as a smaller station, which is stupid. Also, rather than the 10 platform, I think you found 11 platform design previously developed. The 10 platform design was basically still not finished. Reduced the number of requirements at the station, including removing the planned tunnel connection between Euston and Euston Square underground stations. This is a baffling decision because, again, that's a thing that Crossrail 2 was supposed to deliver, absolutely necessary for the safe development of a station at Euston. Appoint a development company separate from HS2 to deliver the HS2 station. Why? No value in doing that whatsoever. The right thing to do is to deliver Euston as its own station off the bat. It's its own project right off the bat. Now we're way past that being viable at this point. All that a development company does is delay things. Explore creating a development corporation to support a larger redevelopment beyond the station boundary, including housing. Why? Just don't do that. And then last is bring in private sector investment to fund works, thereby releasing $6.5 billion of planned spend at Euston to other transport projects. Off. So that's my detailed analysis on that. That is just. I mean, not only is it fiction and gibberish, because that's not how money works at government level, but also it's just like what private sector developers coming in to do that? None. DfT considers that the changes would help address the affordability and integration challenges. That's just it saying yes, sure, yes, Treasury, yes, Treasury, yes, Treasury, which had previously proved difficult for DfT to resolve. Spoiler alert, this won't fix them. I can tell you now, this doesn't fix them. This doesn't fix anything. This just makes more of a mess. A smaller station with fewer requirements would be cheaper. it would also not do its job. It would not do its job. That's the point. It's there to do a job. The first thing that you design the station to do is not be cheaper. It's to do the job. Good grief. Anyway, right, so the increased scope of works at Euston incorporating wider commercial development and new housing now means there are 4 key projects at the station site. HS2 Euston Station, Network Rail Euston Station, absolutely. Development of the Euston Station site, sure. Develop new commercial property and housing, and regeneration of the wider Euston Quarter. Again, I worry about this because there's actually quite a thriving past generation immigrant population in and around the Camden area and around that station that's already been blighted horrendously by the work at Euston, and this is now dragging on for them even further, and it's appalling. Like, Euston Station should have been delivered as expensively as it needed to be and as quickly as possible to minimise that disruption to the people around it, because more people than anywhere else along the HS2 route are around that station and are being heavily impacted by it, including council housing estates that have been demolished to deliver the Euston Station. They're now going to be, turned back into flats just for rich people to come in and property invest rather than actually to live there, thereby kicking out a load of the local population and gentrifying it and making it unaffordable for them to return. Good stuff. There'll also be other requirements that support all the projects. Anyway, right, fine. Wide now. There is now. This is a key statement. There is now a wider range of stakeholders. Wait, I thought we were supposed to be simplifying this, including other government departments, following the expanded scope of the program. So you see what's happened here. Rather than going build a station, we've now gone. Magic will fix this somehow, and it's now being made even more complicated. The problems really got heavily involved when Euston was told to maximise the oversight development, and that's only got worse with all this rubbish. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. So, key stakeholders, Lend-Lease are way up there at the list. Hate these guys. Master development partner, a private company responsible for development above and around the Euston Station. Hate those guys. The Euston Partnership, oh dear. Anyway, Development Corporation not yet established. Station delivery. So all these bodies have appeared. This feels like a good idea, right? Definitely a good thing to do. No, it isn't. DFT is in an early stage in responding to changes announced in October 23. Yeah, sure. However, DFT expects that it could take years to establish a development corporation and bring in private finance. Years is optimistic. It's just never going to happen. It's not set a revised date for when it expects HS2 services to start running from Euston, which is appalling. If services aren't running from Euston, HS2 is not working. You've created a weird, pointless shuttle. It doesn't make any sense, and people will not use it. People will not use it. On the minimum requirements at the station, okay, fine. On delivery model, so DFT commissioned further development work from stakeholders on minimum requirements, so they have no idea. DFT expects it could take around 2 to 3 years to establish development corporation. That's 2 to 3 years of nothing happening. Private funding. DFT conducted an initial assessment which concluded it would be feasible to fund a significant part of the rescope station privately using a combination of funding sources. Wrong. That will just simply not materialise. It's wishful thinking at best. It does not expect private finance to be available for several years, so public funding is likely to be needed to cover necessary works at the site in the short term, i.e. build the whole thing. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. There are works at Euston that may need to be proceeded in the interim to avoid delay to the programme, potentially higher costs in the long term. Completely enabling works at the site currently ongoing. Tunnelling work from Old Oak Common. A decision on tunnelling is needed by the summer of 2024 to avoid much higher costs in the future. Public funding on Euston has only been agreed to the end of March 2025 as part of the spring budget. Other no regrets works that HS2 Limited could continue to proceed with beyond March 2025 include continued clearance of the site. Yeah. So key risks in resetting the programme. So setting up a new delivery body, setting up a development corporation, successfully implementing a new funding model. These are all massive areas of risk. Establishing effective governance for strategic decision making, an eternal risk. Coordinating plans and assumptions across the different projects, ensuring strong collaboration between stakeholders. Yeah, all of these are going to be made so much easier by having 20 stakeholders instead of 2 or 3. So, resetting the HS2 program. This looks at how the plan to reset the HS2 program is going to be how realistic it is. Between 2022 and 2024, HS2 and DFT commissioned a series of internal reviews to examine aspects of how HS2 is organised. Oh my goodness. It's just like, you know what? Changing the organisational structure is not going to help. It's going to just make it worse and worse. You're just creating money for consultants. Oh my goodness. Okay. Incredible. So some of this is learned from Crossroads experience. So establishing a new role of the chief railway officer as the acting as the guiding mind. Okay. Revised accountabilities, governance right, greater organisational emphasis on cost control and efficiencies. Oh, that sounds good and healthy. HS2 board has established a finance and performance subcommittee. Oh, again, that sounds like the way to solve problems rather than just to delay and mire. Reducing the size of the organisation to reflect the new programme scope. So 19 leadership roles and teams, 16 key roles being revised to reflect the new scope. So sacking lots and lots of people is what that means. How much would a phase 1 6 platform use and cost that can be expanded in the future? It would be, you might as well build the original station. Yeah, painful. This document's fine. This document here is, people are moaning about this document. This document's fine. This is the NAO going, what's going on? It's DFT that are the ones that are making the mess. Fine. Yes, whatever. Cost management phase 1, I don't care for writing that. Actually, let's just flick through to see if there's anything relevant in here. HS2 and DFT disagree on total cost for completing phase 1. The difference between 57 and 54 billion. I just don't care about 3 billion quid for a project that's going for a railway that's going to be there for 200 years plus. It's just this is the insanity and the rot. This is a symptom. Costs are a symptom of the rot. They are not the cause of it. This obsession with who cares about 3 billion quid? 3 billion quid over a 20-year program is just nothing. It's nothing. The NHS spends 3 billion quid in about a week. Like, it's not that much money. It's just not an important amount of money. It's just not at all an important amount of money. It's just staggering, the effort, the energy that is going into this. Like, that money is, you're spending it on people, on contractors doing things, on staff who have money who then go and spend it. Like, this is not money that you just set fire to and it disappears. It's just baffling stupidity. Economic illiteracy at the head of government. It's frightening. So there's a lot of, the total cost of the program is also affected by the timing of funding. HS2 had some flexibility to move funding between financial years up to 23. Secured level annual funding request from DFT to meet the planned schedule. However, in March 23, DFT instructed HS2 to meet an annual funding constraint in response to Treasury spending restraints for those years aimed at managing inflationary pressures. Ouch. To meet its annual budget, HS2 slowed work on Phase 2A, Euston and parts of Phase 1, including pausing the start of major construction work for 2 years. In March 24, HS2 assessed that this deferral would increase Phase 1 costs by between £2 and £3 billion. These deferral costs have not yet been assured and approved by DFT. Yes, that was a long pause for, I wouldn't say comedic effect, but pain effect. Just absolutely excruciating. It's just, yeah. So what was that? So 3 billion quid is being argued over. Let's just front the numbers here. So 3 billion quid is being argued over the final cost between DFT and HS2. Meanwhile, HS2 being told to delay the project for inflationary reasons has ended up costing an additional £3 billion. Bearing in mind the inflationary pressures stuff was incorrect, was like not the way to solve the problem, because investing in capital infrastructure is not inflationary. Even the neoliberal maniacs at the IMF have acknowledged and revised their guidelines on infrastructure investment, saying it is not an inflationary problem. So yeah, really good that the UK is just run by idiots. Just staggering level of incompetence in the Treasury and in other parts of government. It's really, really quite breathtaking. So we've gone through kind of the cost increases stuff. There's this inflation plus some other pressures from all the external factors going on at the moment that the government should just swallow and continue to deliver the main scope, not start hacking at the scope to make it cheaper, because that money doesn't exist now. It only exists when government spends it, and actually you get a thing at the end. So steps to reduce costs, whatever. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. HS2 has not driven the cost performance expected through these contracts, and contractual incentives to control costs and improve productivity have not worked as intended. HS2 no longer anticipates that its existing contract incentives can sufficiently manage costs or mitigate the risk of further increases. It now intends to renegotiate these contracts to incentivise greater cost control and achieve more certainty over costs. So, there's another thing to pick up here. It's really quite important to point out that in a country that delivers nothing, so when this is the only project of its kind going on right now, like this is the only major new railway project going on right now. East West Rail is not by relative comparison, not a major new railway. There should be multiple projects like HS2 going on around the country right now, by the way. This is the only one, and this is the main thing bankrolling quite a lot of the UK construction sector. Then what incentive does that construction sector have, particularly given the fact that it's become a political football and might be cancelled? What incentive do they have for long-term cost assurance that is basically just them losing themselves money? What incentive is there? Whereas if they did not have just one project, if there was a clear long-term project strategy of delivery of a program of new lines of major infrastructure, chiefly railways, across the country, then the construction sector would not be trying to rinse this one project. So the project would not have cost escalations like this. Cost, as I say, is a symptom. It is not a cause. Really critical that everyone understands that, particularly these absolute idiots in think tanks who are suggesting cost is the reason. It's just such a tail wagging the dog, and just a kind of a fundamentally unserious analysis of what's going on right now. Revising the HS2 business case, I'm surprised they're even writing this down. I mean, the number was nonsense to start with. The number will be going down dramatically now, which fundamentally then gives Treasury a reason to push on costs even more. Funny that. So that I'm not even going to pick through that. It's just looking at the kind of all the additional impacts on costs and such and such. So maximising the wider economic benefits from this revised scope require DfT to work with other government departments to develop a shared vision of what the programme intends to achieve. This is particularly important where benefits are outside of DfT's direct control and may require further investment to be realised. Funny this was not being written a long time ago. DfT has established the HS2 Growth and Benefits Board to oversee the delivery of benefits and manage risks to their delivery. This includes representatives from DLUC, Treasury, Business and Trade. DfT told us it will update its planned benefits and how it will achieve them as it updates its business case during 2024. I take psychic damage while I have to absorb and Daniel Field is really starting to see the purpose of the Abolish the Treasury channel in the Discord. Yes, Abolish the Treasury is one of the key manifesto aims of RailNatter and me. And I say this document is just one example of why Treasury is a serious problem in Britain continue to be a functional, the UK continue to be a functional going concern as we go forwards. So that was talking about benefits and unlocking benefits. That discussions that should have been happening 20 years ago, and never did, because it would have ironically enough, interfered with a franchised railway system that no longer exists. It does not exist anymore. The demise of that system is kind of ongoing, but functionally the franchise system hasn't existed since 2020. So really key important thing. One of the major reasons why government was ideologically opposed to talking about how HS2 would provide wider benefits, a few reasons, but one of them was because if they said what services would be on other railway lines, that would interfere supposedly with their private system where private companies have control over those timetables, which obviously they do not. So providing, so government going, this is what services will look like in 10, 15, 20 years would interfere with their supposed private system. A system, as I've just said, that no longer exists. So that's one of the reasons why the wider benefits of HS2 were not considered, were not modelled, were not incorporated into the business case. And then we start getting really painful here. So rail capacity on the West Coast Main Line. We're going to go through this in detail. So DfT originally intended, bearing in mind this is not even talking about the East Coast Main Line at this point, but this is just the West Coast Main Line. DfT originally intended the HS2 programme would address capacity on the West Coast Main Line. This is the whole point of HS2. Bearing in mind HS2 came about before the West Coast route modernisation had even finished, because before that project's contracts had been... So the West Coast route modernisation 25 billion quid, I think, in 2019 prices, delivered a fraction of its intended benefits. And all of the additional capacity it did release was absorbed before the final contracts were signed off. So every extra seat was basically absorbed. All that growth was just, it was trivial additional capacity. You know, even if it was 50%, that was just trivial. The demand was such that it just immediately was absorbed. So there's an immediate realization that you had to have HS2, which is where HS2 came about. The beginning of HS2 was before West Coast route modernisation was even completed as a project, before it was even signed off as this project is complete. So that was the point of HS2, is to release capacity on the West Coast Main Line. They reported in 2020 that the line could reach capacity by the mid-2030s. DfT expects that the revised programme will address capacity between London and Birmingham, but there will remain a capacity issue on the West Coast north of Birmingham that DfT will need to resolve. Alright, now I wonder how they might have done that. DfT intends that HS2 services will run north of Birmingham on existing rail. This may provide some time savings on those journeys running through to London. Insert note of extremely at the expense of local capacity, by the way. So all those local services that need the West Coast Main Line, that the whole point of HS2 is to provide more space for, they get obliterated if you have those speed increases on the West Coast Main Line. DfT plans for HS2 trains to substitute for conventional trains, yes, but these trains may have fewer seats, will have fewer seats than existing services. HS2 estimates that between Manchester and Birmingham there could be a 17% reduction in capacity based on HS2 services replacing some of the conventional train services. Just gonna let that one sit. DfT is exploring options to run longer HS2 trains north of Birmingham, but this would require additional works at existing stations, such as at Crewe or Preston, which is work that was certainly at Preston was kind of part planned. At Crewe, well, yes, Crewe was supposed to be getting a completely new reconstructed station. HS2 trains would also likely run slower than existing trains due to current lower speeds for non-tilting trains on the West Coast Main Line. That's true to an extent, less critical. Actually, for these trains, it is a problem compared to, you know, the 80Xs aren't so bad, but these trains will be, I suspect, not quite as zippy to accelerate, given their the performance of high speed of dedicated high speed trains is a little lower than mainline high speed trains in the UK. We'll see. Anyway, point being that tilting trains' days are numbered on the West Coast Main Line anyway. I suspect that that's a kind of a case of diminishing returns, and also, you know, as we've discussed previously, West Coast Main Line is so, right, DfT will need to assess options for addressing capacity issues on the West Coast. These could involve, for example, let's see what shit ideas have been brought forward here. Managing demand for the service. For example, by incentivising people to travel at different times or not to travel by rail. For the benefit of listeners, that was Gareth smashing his head against the table. This may constrain economic growth in the region over the long term and increase environmental costs. Carbon? Anyone? Climate change? No? No? Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Improving or adding infrastructure? Like HS2, maybe? Hell. This may be expensive and disruptive. Yeah, that's how that works. If existing infrastructure were updated, this would create major disruption on a busy route, hence the reason for HS2. If we learn from West Coast route modernisation, on-network upgrades don't work. They're shit. They make a mess. They are enormously expensive and take ages and are very difficult to control the costs of. Additional infrastructure, such as additional tracks and longer platforms, would need to be planned and delivered early enough to address the capacity constraints. I'm a little annoyed that the NAO are being less assertive about how stupid a decision this is. Like, these are obviously both. Like, the second one is just saying, why aren't we just delivering the plan? Like, the project that's just been cancelled is the thing that we need to do this. I'm surprised they've not said. I'm surprised they're not being more assertive. Their remit is quite specific, so perhaps they just aren't able to within that remit. But so DfT will need to balance trade-offs in developing options while considering the impact on an operation of the railway as a whole. So, yeah, Robert Mangrum asks, why did Labour constantly criticise the Tories' rail plans and cancellations when they're doing it themselves? Oh, yeah, quite. I genuinely can't fathom the ignorance of that sense regarding the impacting the economic growth when they've just been moaning about 3 billion quid. Yeah, well, quite. So, that, to be honest, that's all I can cope with. The rest is appendices. They talk about their audit approach, the evidence-based document review, and that is that. Thank you, NAO. You can buy that for 10 quid, crikey, or just get it for free as a PDF. My head actually hurts from bashing it. Don't do that at home, kids. I did a lot of head bashing when I was a primary school teacher. No, when I was at primary school, and actually I David Bowied my eyes, which was fun. That happened after bashing my head repeatedly. I mean, I don't know whether they were related or just timed well, but yeah, I do have different. Got the David Bowie eyes, if you look closely. Very weird. I don't know if you can actually see it. It has diminished a bit over time, actually, but it used to be really dramatic. Like, I used to have one that was really quite large. Anyway. So. What's everyone's thoughts? What are we all thinking? It's painful. That last point about, like, so one of the things that's frustrating is that all the stuff I've been saying about HS2, the consequences of HS2, or the need for HS2 is all coming true. So I take no glory and joy in it, but all those arguments I had about what the need for HS2 is and what the consequences of not having HS2 is, all of those are just happening. They're just happening. We'll just have to use, all the people who are saying, but HS2 tickets will be so expensive. And it's like, no. Also, if you don't have HS2, tickets will get more expensive to reduce the number of people who can use the railways. Like, this is, Valkyrie VP is saying, I think we need to start having some positive news to end on each episode, but heck, this is depressing. I know, I'm sorry, everyone. We've got a whole NAO report saying what those in the industry have already been saying, as this is some sort of major revelation. Yeah, I know, right? Well, the NAO have a particular remit, don't they? Howard me out. Is the only good news in the document the confirmation that no land has been sold? Yes. Gareth, could we get an episode looking closely in detail at where the biggest bottlenecks in the UK rail system are? Kyle Topfer, what you want is episode 1 of Rail Natter. I believe episode 1 is Britain's biggest rail pinch points. Yes, can we ask India to colonise the UK might help, not with the current Indian government. I dare say it would be only marginally less of a bloodbath than when we invaded India previously. Is there any hope? Jamie Potts. Interestingly enough, I do have an episode lined up where I talk about the fact that there is hope. Jamie Potts is saying failed state, absolutely. Raphael Nicholas is saying, that was quite a toughie, but thanks for sharing anyway, Gareth. Yeah, you're very welcome. We did this together. That's why a read-through is a read-through Rail Natters, particularly this sort of thing, are worth being done together. Nucker is saying, the good news is that this report has finally triggered some positive press reporting on how bad a decision to cancel HS2 was. Might politically help resurrecting it. Yeah, that unfortunately, the reports like this are too late, but they are an important part of building that energy behind explaining why the decision was so stupid. Jack Stonehouse, unrelated question, are we going to be experiencing more train spotting and taxiing today? Ooh, well, just stay momentarily tuned to that. Victoria Amori is saying, would you campaign to change political institution for government to invest in rail? Forgive me if you don't want to be a political chat. There is no discussing any of this without politics. Would you be campaign to change political institution for government to invest in rail? The thing I push for very hard is that we can't do this with Treasury with the level of power it has, and whether that involves an abolishment of the Treasury or a massive devolution of power away from Treasury, that has to happen. But there are other things we can do even with Treasury in place, and I've written a book about it that you can all read, that I'll be pushing. I'm a matter of only a few days away from properly announcing. You'll be very excited to know. I think there is hope in that Labour still continues to criticise cutting short of HS2 to an extent. Yeah, I think Louise knows it's a bad idea, but Louise is also unable to announce anything positive. They're waiting for Jürgen Meyer's review, but I suspect Jürgen's review will say nothing of any value. Wasn't there a bill to formally cancel HS2 Phase 2 and dispose of all the land in the King's Speech? Yes, there was. Yeah, there was. Yeah. So I suspect that the us going, isn't it great the land hasn't been sold, is a thing that will rapidly not be true. We've known from the start there was never any freed HS2 money because it will cost $2 billion more not to build HS2, so just don't spend that money and save $2 billion by building HS2. Plus also the fact that that's not how the money works anyway. Any chance of getting Can It Go Bust rule merch? Want a mug for my desk? Oh, that's a very good idea. I should go and... Valkyrie, at me in the Discord server and remind me of that. Yes. It's choosing between bad and worse, especially when GB has two-party and official. Really, we have a one-party system. We have the government party, and then we have the other parties, and what's happened in the last general election is that the government party made such an arse of itself that it was no longer allowed to be the government party, and so the other party is now the government party, and they're the same functionally. Their ideologies are very, very similar. Their activities, it's a very depressing state of affairs. So long-termism is good, short-termism is bad, and if we don't have radical change, we're just not going to be able to solve the problems that all the stuff that I talk about in being inbound is going to happen to us. We have no way of escaping it. The changes we need to make, and we will have to make at some point. It's just whether we're going to make them in a panic, with it costing, with us suddenly not being able to care about how much it costs because every single person has to get out and build railway duty, or we do it with some semblance of organisation and control at this point, at this end of this, the kind of the in advance of the crisis rather than in following the crisis. I'm not going to, Graham. Yes, but also I won't. I'm not going to say any more about the book. I'll do all the full announcements about it next week. So, oh my goodness. The HS2 Phase 2B bill that was put forward in the King's speech was not a formal cancellation as such. Phase 2B was never passed to begin with. Yeah. Right. So, Keith Voice, we will need to make the changes that need changing. Yeah, quite. On last week's Natter, does your high-speed rail plan retain southeastern high-speed services into Kent? I'm not sure, really. That's from Blair Lauren Athol. Blair Lauren Athol. That's a clever name. Blair Lauren Athol. No, but not necessarily no, if that makes sense. So kind of it probably does retain them because they do work quite well. Ideally, you wouldn't do that because the 140 mile an hour trains do diminish capacity in HS1, but I wouldn't necessarily get rid of them, but upgrades to the existing network to allow them to run. There are things you do. Interesting question though. Right, so I look forward to being sent out on my state mandated railway building duty. Yeah, that's kind of that at the moment. That's the trajectory we're on. Which it'd be a bit like Yugoslavia in the mid to late 40s. Which, to be fair, mixed bag depending on whether you lived in Istria or not. But if you didn't live in Istria, it wasn't bad. Hard work, but everyone got out and volunteered and built 1,500 kilometres of railway. Anyway, for all those in audio-only format, thanks for listening. It's been a delight, a joy, and a pleasure to have you along. Am I a week out? I might be out of date with the pod. If I'm out of date again, I'm so sorry, but these will be getting uploaded as a pair. Everything's chaos at the moment. I have no routine. Next week. No, not next week. The usual plugs, patreon.com/Gareth Dennis to support this. Please do support me on Patreon to do more of this. To those who do support, thank you so much. Without you, this wouldn't happen. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't continue to exist. I would have no ability to justify continuing to spend time doing this thing that I absolutely adore and love. So you keep it going. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch. There needs to be some can it go bust rule merch, doesn't there? That's okay, we've learned that. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and abuse. Thanks to those who do send a message and a penny on the PayPal. And GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the chat to continue ad infinitum. Always a joy. It's always good to have the chat next to me. What's Gareth saying? What's my 2020's UK equivalent of the Belgrade Bar Railway? I think that's probably going to be building HS2 or building the high-speed line north of Manchester, isn't it? Getting it over Shap and Beattock is probably the equivalent of the. I'd say that probably Beattock is like the equivalent of Collishin. Yeah. Anyway, so in 25 minutes, we're going to jump back into GTA 4. I've been very upset at my continued bug shooting of TPF2 is not winning results. I might have to do another stream where people help me try and fix it, but to dodge that pain, it's given me a chance to update other things behind the scenes. So it's not time lost particularly, but it's frustrating because I want that series to progress. But anyway, we're going to do episode 3 of me arsing around in GTA 4 because it's fun to have an escape, and we've got some more bridges to go and judge, and some more bridges to fall off if indeed we screw that up. BJ Euron sent me $1 on it's the first ever live chat donation. That's a thing that happens. That's very cool. It's a thing that I was told to make work and is now working, which is really cool. Thanks for that. Very kind. Thanks for the $1. $1, or in GBP, £1, because the pound is worth nothing. Gainful employment. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to do some jobs. We're going to earn some money and continue to avoid stealing any cars. That's an Engineer Plays in about 25 minutes. So we'll see you then. Next week is going to be, it's episode 225, so we have to have an Intercity 225 chat. I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about a few things. This might not be the actual chat, the actual title. There might be more in there, but I'll be talking. There'll be a bit of news and some exciting announcements, book related. So join for that, and I'll give you a bit of can answer some questions, a bit of a Q&A for the Rail Natter heads on the book. Probably is the main the main thing we'll talk about. But anything, it's going to be an open Q&A, because I haven't had one of those for a while, and I missed them. So we'll open with a bit of news, and then it'll be a nice open Q&A. So. Oh, everyone, yeah, it was painful, but we get there, and everything you do to help, whether it's being in the chat, whether it's advocating for the stuff we talk about, whether it's just listening and absorbing the stuff we discuss, whether it's telling me that I'm wrong, also a highly valuable part of the process, or whether it's shouting at me as to guests that we want to get on, all of this, a delight. I love doing Rail Natter, and even painful episodes like this are still a delight because of you lot. So, everyone, I will see you all next week, and possibly in 20 minutes, depending on whether that's the sort of thing you fancy. Anyway, cheerio! Cheerio!